on to the Vale. So Sansa, right? She's at the gates of the moon, learning the ways of Littlefinger, pretending to be Elaine Stone. So some big plot points from the Vale. Littlefinger has successfully quieted the Lord's declarant and has bought himself a year in time in the Vale. Littlefinger is also likely poisoning Robert Arryn, albeit slowly, so that he will seem innocent of the crime. Sansa is learning the ways of Littlefinger and is able to more quickly pick up on Littlefinger's plots. Littlefinger plans to have Sansa marry Harry the Heir, Harding, claiming fealty from the Vale and take the North. However, Sir Shadrack the Mad Mouse has just arrived at the Gates of Moon and has sworn service to Littlefinger. Sir Shadrack, if you recall, was the knight that Brienne encountered on the way to Duskendale. He's searching for Sansa to recoup money lost in his ransom. Sansa has inadvertently revealed information to Miranda Royce that might reveal her identity. Now, I will say that Sansa she's not the one, but she is one of the characters that in the books, I have no idea what's going to happen to her, because she's a total chess piece for me that George is going to have to figure out, because even whether you try to sort of fit stuff into the show as like a rough outline, she's like not where she is, totally different person, totally different piece. So to me, like almost all of her arc that happens in the show is not happening to her going forward. Maybe she will end up as Queen of the North. I'd be fine and could see that. But the way we're going to get there is totally different. And then just sort of projecting how I think the books in my headcanon, and I think a lot of people's sort of mindset of how the books will finish very differently. I'm still struggling to see how I think she's going to get to go forward. I mean, she could marry young Griff. She could stay in the Vale for a bit and be involved in something that's going on with King's Landing, like sending knights there. We could run into Lady Stoneheart. There's a lot of different paths and avenue for Sansa. The sort of key theory surrounding Sansa that I think has some validity is the 5 champions.
Yeah.
Right. And that ultimately she could end up marrying or being promised to marry a Targaryen, whether that's young Griff as a false Targaryen, a real Targaryen, or even Jon or something. It does look pretty likely that is what's going on with her. And that could be a power play. I mean, her real conflict currently and probably going forward into Winds of Winter and perhaps Dream of Spring is with Littlefinger.
Yeah, for sure. And, you brought up that theory about the different champions, and like the one right prior to being like engaged to or married to like a Targaryen is the Harry the Heir.
So the 5 champions were Lionel let me see here. The Ashford theory, right? So Lionel Baratheon, Leo Tyrell, Tybolt Lannister, Humphrey Harding, and Valar Targaryen.
Yeah.
Those were the 5 champions. So she was promised to Lionel Baratheon, who technically, if you really want to get technical about it, people think, well, it's really Joffrey Lannister. Well, it's not even actually Joffrey Lannister. It's Joffrey Hill, because he's a bastard. Leo Tyrell, she was married to Willis, or she was potentially talked to being married to Willis Tyrell. Tybolt Lannister, she was actually married to Tyrion, who she's technically still married to. There was no annulment. There was no divorce.
Not consummated, yeah.
Right. Now she's promised to Humphrey Harding, or planning to, and then the final one is a Targaryen. Now, it could be interesting if the final Targaryen is also sort of a fake Targaryen, which would be young Griff, if that that scenario. So that means the first and the last would technically be not really a Baratheon.
Sure.
If you want to go that route.
Yeah. Unless she and Jon Targaryen are going to,
right.
Which is crazy. Yeah, man, I actually think Sansa is a big wild card. Like the show sends her north, but in the book, she might be going back to King's Landing. Like Sir Shadrack, the Mad Mouse, is also an interesting character because Brienne does know him, and she is searching for a maid with auburn hair. And, and he's like, yeah, we know. He's like, we get it. We're looking for her too. And so he will come across her if she does undye her hair, and if Miranda Royce does figure out that this is Sansa Stark, well, that's going to be a big deal. So things can unfold pretty quickly here for Littlefinger, but Sir Shadrick is in Littlefinger's employ, maybe he's buying him. Um, if that's the case, if he's working for Littlefinger, is he really going to take her back to which would the Mad Mouse take her back to King's Landing, or would he maybe later on mention to Brienne where she's at? Like if he comes across Brienne later on, could he say, "Hey, I actually met someone like that," or in talking to Littlefinger, I found her, but I'm paid to keep quiet on it. But here's where she's at. You know what I mean? Like he could be. Not that he would double cross Littlefinger. I don't know. He's sort of a wild card. Like the Mad Mouse is just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's one of those characters where I was so worried for years, and again, we're so many years later after the last book that I'm sitting here going like, it is no wonder it's a freaking rat. One time I saw Matt turn around and get into all those cords he has behind his desk, like the rat's nest of cords, and I thought this is what George is looking at when he looks at his series. Going, I put the Mad Mouse in here, like all these characters he adds in, all these different layers. It is just absolutely wild to think about. So yeah, he could be interesting. What is he going to do? What type of knight is the Mad Mouse? Is he lying about some of his accomplishments and things like that? That's the other piece that Brienne is always she's going through. She comes across different knights and she realizes they're not as honorable. Some are. Some hold true to their vows. Some don't. Will does she challenge him? Yeah, and it's all in relationship to Sansa. So now Littlefinger himself too is vying for power. He's got this year with the Lords Declarant, and he is up to something. I think the poisoning Sweet Robin is interesting. He's been known to have other people poisoned and work in poisonings and things like that. So that way his hand is clean of all these things. So I don't know how that would be discovered or what the deal would be there, because if he does accomplish that, then he's actually getting ready to marry possibly his daughter, or Sansa, right? Will be then given over to Harry the Heir, right? That's the next they're all looking at him as a possibility for Sansa. So I don't know.
Right here too, in George's original outline, which we can go look at and stuff like that, right? It was supposed to be a perhaps Jon, Arya, Tyrion love triangle, but remember he had initially planned for sort of like an aging up 5-year gap, and so Arya would have been a little bit older, and so some people have theorized, going back to the Sansa arc, is that Jon and Sansa could get together, because Jon would be a Targaryen,
Right.
and then Sansa would be a Stark, which would then also fit the idea of a Song of Ice and Fire.
It's not crazy. I mean, it is, but it's not.
Which we mostly think is all Jon and Dany, because we still think of Jon as a Stark more than we think of him as a Targaryen, because technically he grew up in the North and all this stuff.
Right.
But then it would actually be Jon as fire, if you want to view that way, and Sansa Stark as ice.
Which is so crazy, because Sansa is more like her mother, who's from the Riverlands, right? And then Jon is more like his mother, who's from the North. But also he's got the fire blood in him, and it would represent it's so bonkers to kind of think about how that would be flipped, and to think about the female line. George does that a lot, which is like, people talk about the Blackfire line, and it was carried on through the female line, or how the prince is really the princess, and so on. He's master of these sorts of manipulations, and we've all kind of lined up in our mind. Like when we think of Targaryens, we often just think of the platinum hair and the eyes and so on, but some of them were Dornish. Some of them did not look Targaryen at all. So they still represent, do they still represent fire or not? Do you have to? Yeah. So that's a pretty cool one. Sansa's a total wild card, and I've never really known where to go with her, because
Maybe George doesn't either, and that's why
that's why we're stuck. That's why he's stuck. Because and Littlefinger's demise as well. I feel like that's going to happen, but I just don't know.
I think it's going to be totally different than the shows.
Yeah, and it needs.
In fact, I think Littlefinger. We did a big thing about don't count out Littlefinger a while ago, and we basically said everyone just counts him, even Jaime, everyone, and he's going to be his ending in the show is easily one of the worst.
Mhm.
Easily.
Yeah.
If not the worst, to be entirely honest.
Well,
It
and
literally it just feels like we need to kill him off.
right, right. And he's one of those characters who's been around since the beginning, you know? So I always go back to like these were characters who were early on in George's mind, and he's using other characters. Like we talk about Val, we brought up the Mad Mouse, we talk about these other wildling characters who show up or whatever, other lords that appear later in the series. They don't matter as much. They are that second wave, and I know the 5 year gap was the thing, but like these are characters who've been around since the beginning. He had a plan, he had an outline with them, and they will have their moment because they've just been near and dear to him. And there's, I mean, in whatever way they can be to to the author. But yeah, Littlefinger is it's hard to tell. I always thought him and Varys were gonna have some showdown, and I was waiting for that in the show, and it just never happened. I mean, he like Arya. Why in the heck is Arya involved in any of that? I just you know, Sansa, I get like she's had a history with him, and that's got to be her big takedown. But